Thank you. All right, good afternoon. Too bad the sun's out and we're inside. I'm here today to talk to you about how marketing can help with growing your business, and I'm what I call an outside-in person. Generally, startups have more inside-out people. They're thinking from a problem set and working out to the market. I'm working from the customer back in. Let's see. So today what I want to talk about are the forces that really influence buying behavior. And I don't know if you realize, but in the first few seconds, this is from sales presentation research, your prospect's going to form 11 impressions of you that ultimately fall into the yes, no, and maybe. So you have under 10 seconds to form that initial impression that you're then working from the rest of your interactions. Young companies tend to have, in essence, too much to say. You're enamored with your technology, you see all the different ways it could be used, so when you put that 10-second out there, the founders usually just cringe, like it's just not possible. So part of what we're going to do today is step through a process of how to really distill out the strength of a message. There's a story that went around about Mark Twain that said, "I didn't have time to write you a short letter, so I wrote you this long one," which is the startup phenomena. So I want you to recognize that there's marketing forces, I liken them to waves, that can help propel companies in their growth. And so instead of searching for those waves, my goal here today is help you see those waves and understand how you can ride them. So I want to start by just, it's a rhetorical question, but what's the biggest market wave I want you to think about that you think you could ride to propel growth? Just, take a minute and ask yourself. The answer is having a compelling why now. Now this is an amazingly simple concept that I'm going to spend some time on because the impact is kind of extraordinary. If there's one thing that I want you to remember from this presentation today, it's this: understanding the value of having a compelling why now. I gave a talk similar to this to your commercialization of technology engineering group a few years back, and it was the professor that came up to me after the class and said, I had a business that failed and I never understood why, and now I do. I didn't have a why now. Now what's a why now? I liken it to, I had the pleasure of river rafting down the Grand Canyon, and when we got to Lava Falls, the largest navigable rapid in North America, the guides and all of us are on the shore in hushed tones, looking at the rock configuration, because just because you went through it yesterday doesn't mean it'll be the same today. There could have been changes. And as we're assessing the situation, a kayak comes along, one of those little bitty short ones, and disappears into the rapids. And we all hold our breath, and about 20 seconds later, he emerges upright about 2 football fields down the river. And of course we cheered and thought, well, if he can do that, well, so can we, because we were in rubber boats and had professional guides with us. The point in telling that story is that's what a why now in a marketplace feels like. And as a small company, single person in a kayak, you can be propelled rapidly in growth if you understand that why now. If you don't have a why now, it's more like this, where if there's no current, it takes a team of strong people, lots of people, coordinated, and in those same 20 seconds that fellow went 2 football fields, this group's only going to go a few hundred yards in that same period of time. And very few companies, including large companies, can afford to do that. So that's the leverage of value of a why now. Why do you need a why now? Because you need to overcome status quo. And that's no easy feat. If you think of everyone pretty much is heading towards a destination, you as a new company, of course you're enamored with your product, but they don't know you or what your product can do. think of it as a highway, and they're headed somewhere, and you're asking them to change and take an exit that they weren't intending to take. That's a pretty dramatic ask. So that's the value of a why now, and it'll help move from interest to action. That's why I call what I do change marketing, because a startup needs to recognize that the early marketing that you're doing really has to recognize the change you're expecting someone to do and help them through that process. So to do that, one of the first and most important things you need to do is understand how you're communicating your value clearly, concisely, and competitively. Because again, if you start from that framework of you've got a very limited amount of time to make that first impression, you need to get right to it. So there's a framework. I've been doing positioning and messaging for over 25 years in my own business. My own background was, I was the person that conceived of Prodigy and designed and launched it, kind of opening the online area. So I was an entrepreneur having to discover all these things myself. I was fortunate that early in my career I was able to put a product into the market, bring it back, overhaul it, put it back out, have millions of dollars from large companies, teams of hundreds of people to learn this, and have developed these principles, which are, I'm going to go through why me, why now, why this product. Young companies tend to start with why my product. You haven't made the essential connection with someone yet. If we were in a party situation and you walked up to me and the first thing you started doing was telling me all the details about your child's application to Harvard University, you'd think twice about how much longer you want to stand there talking to that person. You haven't established anything in common yet. That's what a why me is. Why should I listen to you? The why now is next. Okay, we find some common ground, but why now? Why does this really matter to me now? If I was having a child that was going to be ready to go to school, maybe I'd be interested in hearing a little bit about your Harvard application. If I don't, not really. And what a why now also helps you do is understand who the optimal target customer is. When you look at target marketing, you can put it into three buckets. There's the potential customer that you're interested in. And young companies, yeah, that's really easy to do. Yeah, I'm aiming my product towards developers. Yes, I'm aiming my product towards doctors. Yes, I'm aiming my product towards lawyers. That's just a potential market. And that's easy to go and look up a number and put a number down. And anyone who has reviewed business plans for young companies kind of understand that's most of all they've done, which is to put a number down. That's a potential market. The next question you have to ask yourself is, what's the reachable market? So just because there's that many doctors doesn't mean that as a marketer, you're going to be able to reach them with your message. So how many of them gather? How many of them are active? How many are in the different specialties? Once you understand reachable, then there's optimal. Okay, of all those doctors, which are the ones that are really going to write you a check? The ones that are going to write you the check are the ones you've made the connection on a why now. Then the third step is, if you've established why me, why now I'm ready to hear about your product. Not in a lot of detail, in how you're going to stand out from the rest. So the next question you can ask yourself is, are you positioned to speed acceptance and growth? And I'm going to spend a little bit of time on a very important concept, which is positioning. Positioning is how you differentiate yourself from the competition. I do work with 9 Mile Labs, which is a B2B incubator here in Seattle that has 9 startups. I've worked with all 18 companies in their class. I've also worked with Techstars, and I had to laugh. They set up a meeting for me with one of the young companies, and I always start them with, what would you like to accomplish in this time that you have with me? And one of the fellows said, I want to do positioning. And I said, well, that's terrific, because that's what I do. And we went in and had a whole discussion. And when we finished, he said, wow, now I know what positioning is. I just knew I needed it because the investor told me I needed it. So Positioning is how you're going to differentiate yourself, and it's never too early to understand positioning. Positioning, good positioning, is what drives even your earliest product development decisions. As you are developing your technology or developing your product, you're having to make pretty important assumptions about who it is that's going to use that product, and you never have enough resources. So of the 15 things that you have on your list, what are the 3 that are really going to make or break the company? If you understand your positioning, you'll know the answer to that. Positioning is something that people can make complicated. I put myself more in the engineering camp of marketers. I don't think marketing is magic. I think it's hard work and clear thinking. Over the years, I've learned there's really 4 fundamental ways you can position yourself. There's an infinite number of ways that you can choose to express it. You can be an only. And I'm going to give examples of these, but I'm going to just set them up. You can be a first. First doesn't mean first to market. It means a series of first. Those tend to be your innovative companies. And then you can be a best or a most. And this, I'm not supposed to walk across the line. This is presented this way because you can't be a best and a most. And when I look at young companies' communication materials, often I see all 4 of those concepts in there. Research has shown us that if you can't be a best and a most. If you're going for best positioning BMW, that usually aligns with a premium product. If you're most, Walmart is an example of most. Those things are contradictory. You can be an only and a best. You can be an only and a most. Now I'm going to step you through some examples because this is a very foundational thought for the success of a company. W.L. Gore is an example of an only. My work with them was to help them transition from their only to best. They created the technology, PTFE, that is what is in Gore-Tex fabric. My work with them was with their medical group, and they make artificial blood vessels. If your dogs have tendons that need to be replaced, that's Gore-Tex. Dental floss, all kinds of brain patches, all kinds of interesting products made out of the same thing that your Gore-Tex jacket is. So my work with them, so they were an only because they invented the technology and they were patent protected. That's an only. And the salespeople were coming back and saying, after the patents expired, whoa, we've been saying only for a bunch of years here. Now the Baxter rep was in there right before me, and he said, no, we offer those blood vessels too. So our work was to move to best positioning, where wouldn't you really rather buy the blood vessel, artificial blood vessel, from the people that invented it, that have 20 years into it, endorsed by the leading physicians, than somebody that just copies the formula and says, yeah, me too. So that's an example of only. Pixar is an example of first. And my husband laughs because I see marketing everywhere. And we were watching the director's track after we finished watching the Monsters, Inc. movie. And in the middle of the director's track, one of the directors that's talking says, yeah, and we were the first to animate a flushing toilet. And I said, there's a company that understands its positioning. It's even at that level. They have a whole series. They knew they were the first to do a full-length featured animation, but coming right down to the director articulating that. So that's an example of a first positioning. Then there's best. And Apple, this was actually their statement on their website up till a few months ago, which you still find it hard to believe that they would put the Mac first. With the iPhone success. But Apple is the company that understood right from the beginning that they were choosing a best strategy. If they had been unclear about what positioning they were taking in the marketplace, they wouldn't have created the iPhone. So there's a theme I'm going to keep coming back to. People have positioning linked to, I try to jam it in before I launch. And I enjoy talking to startup groups because I want to plant this seed. Ooh, that's really too late. Positioning is a fundamental driving aspect of a choice you're going to make about your business right from the time you're coming up with the idea to seeking investment to getting into the marketplace. It's great to do at launch, but better to do earlier. And I think Apple is a good example of having understood that. Amazon is another, which is, they're an example of most positioning. And they knew right from the beginning they wanted to be the world's largest bookstore. And I think it's interesting, the transition of their logos. So we seek to be the Earth's most customer-centric company for 4 primary customer sets. And when they began in 1995, I mean, what a non-attractive looking logo that is. But the point is, they were showing the highway and using the concept of largest and most. And they started as books. Then you can see their evolution to books, music, and more, and ultimately to the current state, which is Amazon A to Z. The arrow is a smile that is saying A to Z, we're covering everything. So very good example of understanding their position from the beginning. How they chose to express it evolved as they grew. Since I'm speaking here in my local town of Seattle, I decided to, how many of you watched the Super Bowl? All right. I watched the Super Bowl for the commercials, I'll admit it, but this year was more interesting. And there's 2 commercials. I'm going to show one now and one a little bit later in the presentation that I want to share with you for a couple of reasons. We're going to look at the VW commercial, and what's significant about the VW commercial is that German engineering has been a positioning attribute attributed to premium brands primarily built by BMW and Mercedes. And if you think of BMW, the ultimate driving machine, that has been the purview of German engineering. What VW did here was quite interesting from a marketing position, because they're leveraging all of that and turned it into a most, which is typically been a lower price point, larger scale type story. So let's go ahead and take a look. It's a YouTube video.
Hey Darcy, look. 100,000 miles.
So?
It's a big deal. What if I told you that every time a Volkswagen hits 100,000 miles, a German engineer gets his wings?
Dooby-dooby. 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 Dooby-dooby-doo. Dooby-dooby-doo. Dooby-dooby-doo.
I hate these wingy thingies.
Yeah, Dad, and I'm sure at 200,000 miles, rainbows shoot out of their butts.
Volkswagen has the most vehicles on the road with over 100,000 miles. That's the power of German engineering.
Now, whether you like their sense of humor or not, pretty significant repositioning, which is to take all that German engineering, which comes with the premium price, put a humor spin on it, and transition it to a most. So I wanted you to have an example of just, you're going to look at commercials and advertising differently after this discussion, and I hope you will. Okay, so all together now. I want to step you through an example. So I picked crabgrass because I couldn't think of anything that probably is more boring. And a lot of technology is dry, let's put it that way. So I'm going to step you through the problem is crabgrass. The why me is, do you have a lawn? And we spent some time crafting this. We could have said, do you own a home? But lawns are at golf courses, etc. So do you have a lawn? If you get a yes, we go forward. If you get a no, just as good. In young companies, you can spend a lot of time, and young salespeople in young organizations tend to take it as a personal affront if they can't convert every single person that they run into. So a tremendous amount of company resources can get chewed up because he knows he's gonna get them. And very late in the process, you find out they don't even have a lawn. We've been very enthusiastic chasing them. So in a young company, getting a no is very valuable because you can walk away from each other comfortably and put your resources elsewhere. Of course, you want to get a yes. So in this case, yes, I have a lawn. Why now? Do you know that when dandelions change from the yellow to the white, if you put down crabgrass killer once, right then, you're done for the year. Why my product? In the case of Scott's, they have best positioning because the granules that the fertilizer is made up of is actually a composition of all the ideal chemicals versus the competition, which just puts the chemicals in the bag and kind of shakes them up. And they show the beauty shot. I didn't get the video before it was pulled down. They have a video of the result, the beautiful green grass with no crabgrass in it. So you can see in 30 seconds or less, I was able to take a dry concept that you may or may not have been interested in and get you through, do you have a lawn, one dose, and why my product is better. That's the model here. And you can't underestimate the value. I work with many, many, many startups, and it's always the issue of how do you describe what you do effectively. The second commercial that I want to show you, also from the Super Bowl, is the T-Mobile commercial. And the reason I want to show you this one is, of course, clearly the VW commercial had high production value. It's a major agency. Buku bucks were spent on creating that one. Now, make no mistake, this was created by an ad agency, but this is an example where if you understand what you want to say, it can be done in a startup kind of budget. So go ahead and. So a couple things really significant about that. The first is the telecommunication industry and the cell phone providers in particular have been locked in a who's got the better coverage battle. Young companies tend to automatically position off of some feature of their product. And I'm showing you this so that you see the landscape can be broader than a feature. So in this case, you know, AT&T and Verizon, AT&T's had its dots, Verizon has had the can you hear me, all of which T-Mobile is the underdog in this scenario. So if they try to play on, I have more dots, can you hear me, they're not going to win. So they changed the playing field and they said, okay, it's not going to be about that, it's going to be about how we sell that product. And there's a very clear why me in there, which is, yeah, if you're tired of being locked in, you'll actually consider this. You're going to have to look at where the dots are eventually, but it's not going to be the first consideration that everybody else makes. So it's a very strong execution of an idea. And as I said, the second is you see how simple it is. I mean, if you were a startup, it's a message with a music track. Now in this case, it's you know, very high-paid musicians. You know, what a well-known musician wrote the music. But I think you get the point. So once you're able to communicate what you do and connect with that initial audience, Then are you converting prospects into buyers cost effectively becomes the next issue that marketing can really help you address. And I want to spend a minute on helping you see where the change dynamics are. Going back to my initial premise, change is required. And products can be revolutionary, but behavior is evolutionary. So I put this example up, which is a new product that's being sold that's a stand for your iPad in your kitchen with a speaker in the base so that you can hear what's being seen and hear. That's a new product. But we've been cooking for a long time, and we've been using recipes for a long time. So it's important to make the distinction. This product, you could put revolutionary is too strong, but I want to make a distinction between how you talk to the user. If I come to you and say, I've got this revolutionary new thing, the first thing I do is back up. Uh-oh, this is big, it's going to be expensive, it's going to make me change. It's a scary prospect. And if you think, so evolutionary is better. If I approach you and say, hey, you've always been cooking, I know you want to take that iPad into the kitchen, I've got a product that'll help you do that, I'll step forward. Big difference. Products can be revolutionary. It's important to look at behavior as evolutionary. How can I tie? Which is why marketers like to use analogies. We like to use analogies. And there were a couple of people here I was talking to before this started, one fellow that's starting his own business, and he's got an analogy. Well, we're like something else. Very powerful because it moves it into out of an unknown into a known. The second change dynamic I really want to spend a minute on is the who and the how. I had my own learning curve on this. I mentioned that I was the person that conceived a prodigy, and my original assignment was I was the suit that they sent up to the tech center. So there were 200 engineers that were funded to come up with ideas for CBS. And I went and I had a 6-month assignment. Figure out if there's some businesses we can start out of what they're doing. So I sat next to, each day I picked a different engineer and followed him around for a little while to see what he was doing. And settled on, one of the engineers was doing early work on video text and teletext, embedding the signal into the vertical blanking interval. Didn't know what he was going to do with it, but clearly it was a pretty powerful concept. And after I thought about it for a while, I said, you know, what CBS really does well is combine content and advertising. So why don't we do that with the computer? We'll start with this ability of being able to embed information with the television, and Prodigy ultimately evolved out of that. Now, when I was given the resources to launch Prodigy, they said, well, what's the product, Sherril? And I said, okay, let me think about that. And I said, I'm not sure. So what I chose to do was develop about 50 different products. And we tried all the things that are here today. You know, home shopping. Well, we had to get the florist shop in Ridgewood. Our test market was in Ridgewood, and we had to get the florist shop signed up to be our delivery service. We didn't have Amazon Express trucks, but the florist was willing to do it for us. And I remember laying out these different things and saying, I'm going to use research, because CBS was a very research-savvy company, and we did a lot of work with psychographics and that type of thing. And I'm going to see what comes back as being useful. So I spent several $1 million on research, and when the research came back, I just chuckled. Because the answer I got was, people are people. So what did they do? The men used the financial products. The girls used the communication features. The boys played the games. Duh. So that was my really dramatic learning to saying, okay, it's a new technology. To me, there's a lot of unanswered questions, but people are people. So I want to come back to this. Often the who you're trying to address is known. It's not known to you at the moment when you're developing new technology, but you can look at parallels and patterns and say who has been the primary person interested in this. Are we replacing a technology, et cetera? But new technology is not going to take a person who has no interest in something and magically turn them into someone that will be. And so the how we do things are fluid. and open to change. So the last real major change dynamic I want to hit on is known versus unknown. And you know yourself, if you're getting ready to get on that airplane and fly to a country you've never been to, you have a moment of, okay, it's excitement, but it's also, I wonder what I'm going to experience. The element of unknown is there. And unknowns are brakes on technology. They're big brakes. So understanding that while it's known to you, and you as the inventor or the developer of that technology, you're so close to it, you live with it, there's very little scary left in that to you. But turn it around as the outside-in person, where I'm coming at something for the first time, which is what your customer is doing. The unknowns are very serious breaks, and if they're not addressed. So figuring out how to understand what the unknowns are and turn them into knowns can accelerate a sales process and acceptance of your product very dramatically. So I wanted to lay the underpinning for those three dynamics in separating the product from the adoption and acceptance of that product. They're two very different processes. That needs to be understood before you move into the actual marketing to that prospect. And there's a series of steps that good marketers use to market products. And in my case, I call it systematic marketing. But I don't know, I talk to a lot of development groups and engineer groups, and there's a well-known process for developing a product. Okay, have an idea, go collect requirements, create a design document, do your architecture, do your coding, do your testing. Now I know it never goes that cleanly, but that there is a well-understood process. There's the same thing in marketing, and this is the way the process goes here. I show the prospect intentionally looking in a different direction, because you're starting from they know nothing about you and really have no interest in you, and ultimately you want them to become a customer, which takes a series of steps and actions required of you. The first step is awareness and attitude. And research has shown us that repetition is the best way to achieve this. This is why you see commercials repeated. This is why you see campaigns created that go across television, radio, internet, all the various channels, because it takes repetition. There was some research done years ago that said you remember 20% of what you 20% of what you hear, 40% of what you see and hear, and 70% of what you see, hear, and do, which is why we do, please do a demo. Magazines give away free subscriptions. On the internet, we let them download demos or sample, or do an app with 30 days free, because the highest interaction is in a doing scenario. It's paired with awareness and attitude, because some people are in the camp of there is no bad PR. I am not in that camp, because attitude matters. If I generate awareness around something that is negative, as a marketer, I have to dig myself out of that hole. So you have to be aware of, yeah, okay, it's nice a lot of people are paying attention, but what are they paying attention to me for? So awareness and attitude. Once a prospect has taken that step, the next step is gathering information and evaluating. And to be honest, they leave you. This is what scares many marketers. You're not in control of this process. What you are in control of is understanding who the influencers are. So that's a marketing term for who is it that they're going to turn to ask to. So, in the movie situation, it's the reviewer. If it gets a thumbs up, more people will go. In business-to-business selling, large enterprise, it's the analyst. I have to get to the analyst before my product goes out, so that when the customer turns to him and says, hey, have you ever heard of this product? He goes, yes, and I know what they do, etc. So the the second step is gathering information and evaluating. And your sales material can only do so much. And I also just recently, one of the 9 Mile companies that I was working with, I finally got through to them on the point of there is nothing else you can say right now, anything else. Don't produce anything else. Go get a customer quote, because you can't say anything more credible than what you've said. Now it needs to be said by someone like them. So we're not going to invest any more energy creating any more material. We're going to invest the energy to go get your customer base, which is very enthused, and have them speak for you. This is an example of that. Who is it that you want? You can engineer knowing who those people are and help prepare them. And that's what step 2 is. Once they've evaluated and gathered information and evaluated, they come back to you, and sampling is the best technique. So for years there were, I can't give my product away free. These were major marketing fights. Well, I'm strongly in the camp of, put limits on it, but sampling is effective. And once sampling is experienced, then they can buy. And that's about determining the value. So it's a series of steps that, how do you help the person go up the rail with the why me, why now, why this product? So just like in engineering, is it always this smooth? No. Sometimes you're testing before your architecture is complete, yes, but that's the general marketing process that's at work. So to transition into closing, what I wanted to do here today was to help you see what lies ahead. And marketing is one of those areas that young companies, it just looks like a muddy windshield to them. Yeah, okay, we got to do that sometime. So I wanted to clear that and reinforce that it's never too early to make it clear. Starting right from the idea stage, a working session on positioning can help you triage your development. A next step, when you go seek investment, investors expect you to understand your positioning. And if you don't, your odds of getting that investment go down. Yes, they can be enamored with your technology, but ultimately it's about money. And so who is it that's going to appeal to that? Who your technology is going to appeal to, which is what positioning is about. Let's see. And then larger companies lose track of positioning. They had it once, and everything's been going along, but a new competitor comes into the space. Customers change. They change really rapidly. In tech now, we work with about 8 to 10 month life cycles. 8 to 10 months of you better have your impact because you're on to the next one. It's just getting shorter and shorter. So positioning makes a difference there. So what I've done is taken you on a pretty fast ride here through what I call top-down marketing, and want to make the connection that marketing is what sits between make and make money. And I watch young companies go from being enamored with the technology, knowing they need to get a showcase customer, and ramping up the sales team, and marketing is missing in the equation. And then they have to lay off all the salespeople and retool, and the retooling is about marketing. Who's that optimal target customer? Who's going to actually write a check? Wouldn't it be nice to do that before you ramp up the sales activity? And I hope I've given you some insight into ways that you can fast track the growth and profitability of your own companies. And even if you're still in the idea stage here and haven't launched the business yet, I hope I've given you some insight that when you do get there, you'll remember. Okay, thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Sherril. We really appreciate you coming today.
Okay, enjoyed it.